The final trailer for Game Science's Black Myth Wukong has dropped, and suffice it to say, it looks stunning. The music, the visuals, the art direction, the action, everything looks so clean and compelling that we're counting down the days to the release, which thankfully isn't far off. The trailer also provided tons of new details on the gameplay, from the different forms that the Destined One can assume to new bosses, potential new activities, and more. Of course, there's more on top of that, and without further ado, here are 12 new things you should know about Black Myth Wukong before it launches on August 20th for the PS5 and PC. New transformations. We've seen our fair share of transformations thus far, from Guan Xi to a rock man with a massive head, but that was only a teaser for what's to come. The trailer showcased a red-robed form that can dash through and cut enemies with its claws, a tentacle form that performs sweeping attacks to affect enemies all around the Destined One, a spiky form, and so on. Of course, each has unique abilities you can mix into setups for different combos and builds. Transformation skills. Many of the skills from the various transformations are pretty straightforward, whether it's the warrior shooting flaming projectiles with a crossbow, or the spiky-headed boss whose head can be used to batter enemies to a pulp. However, there is a range of other options, like the tentacle form throwing rocks at enemies from afar, the beast-like form which breathes fire and even explodes in a radius, or a ghostly monk that serves as a defensive maneuver. The current selection looks pretty good and seemingly fulfills Game Science's promise of having lots of spells and transformations for players to experiment with. Status effects. Status effects haven't seen too much discussion over the past few years. However, we know that forms like Guan Xi inflict burn damage on enemies with enough hits, as seen in the Tiger Vanguard boss fight. But you can add another status effect into the mix: poison. The blade-wielding monk form seems capable of not only afflicting single targets with poison, but also creating a large explosion to hit multiple foes in an area. Should be interesting to see if other statuses like freeze are included when the game launches. New bosses and enemies. Somehow Game Science has revealed even more bosses besides the dozens shown thus far. Some familiar faces abound in the trailer, but there's also what seems to be a massive snake boss, a giant Oni-like being with massive horns, a muscular rat-like monster, a monk who can send the Destined One's spirit out of its body, which could be tied to the same defensive form, and much more. There also appears to be some unique foes, like a tiger with snake-like properties, with some believing it to be a snake demon wearing the tiger's body. Fox traversal. Not all transformations are meant for combat. As seen in previous trailers, the Destined One can transform into a cicada to fly through certain sections. The latest showcases two other potential forms. First, a fox that can nimbly sprint through a snowfield landscape, and what appears to be a rhino charging through a marshy environment. Bush League stealth. Another useful aspect of transforming is stealth. In one section, the Destined One shapeshifts into a snow-covered plant to avoid the gaze of a massive foe. Now, is this a dedicated stealth section or one part of a larger fight? We've seen invisibility used as a skill, so it could be the latter, but either way, this opens up even more gameplay opportunities. Fishing? I had to do a double take on seeing this, but when the Destined One sits down on the shore of a frozen lake in one shot, seemingly meditating, you can make out a fishing rod. Granted, it's probably just a decorative touch since the water is frozen solid, but it could be an activity in the game. After all, players can embark on quests, open chests for loot drops, and gather materials, so how unbelievable is it to go fishing and obtain resources through the same? Time will tell if this is real, but it would be a welcome addition all the same. New boss fights. Perhaps the biggest surprise of the trailer is the reveal of the 4 characters. How are they involved in the story, and does the Destined One have to battle them? Well, we'll find out in the coming weeks, but they don't seem all that friendly. Fire Ring spell. The end part of the trailer is humorous because it sees the Destined One sitting down with another character for some tea in the middle of a ring of fire. Meanwhile, the Macaque Chief, a boss spotted in gameplay from last year, fruitlessly tries to break through. The same spell was even seen during gameplay, and as it turns out, a similar effect is in place. Upon placing the spell on the ground, even if the Destined One is knocked out by projectiles, the boss can't move directly over it, taking bits of damage and staggering every time it tries. This could make for some good areas of denial in fights against aggressive enemies if used properly. Counter skill. It's been more or less obvious since the first gameplay reveal that Black Myth Wukong doesn't have a default block or parry button. Instead, the Destined One's means of avoiding damage is to jump over attacks or dodge them, with a perfect dodge even serving to replenish focus. However, going through some old gameplay from last year, it seems players can discover a skill or a spell which acts as a defensive counter. In the boss fight against the Macaque Chief, the Destined One employs a spell which turns him rock solid for a brief period. When an attack lands, he'll break out, which seems to knock the boss back and immediately follow up with a counter. Sure, it's on a cooldown, but if done right, the player takes 0 damage, making it extremely potent. Available day one on GeForce Now. Those on PC who want to experience the game on day one but don't have the hardware necessary to make it shine can take heart. In a new blog post where Nvidia celebrated 2,000 titles on GeForce Now, its cloud gaming service, the company confirmed that Black Myth Wukong would be available to experience on day one of launch. Gone Gold. Before releasing its final trailer, GameScience confirmed that development is complete, pretty much declaring the game title has gone gold. However, it's still, quote, working hard on the final stages of experiencing, testing, and deploying the game. It's more than likely that there will be a day one patch with further improvements and whatnot, but regardless, Black Myth Wukong is on track to release as planned for the PS5 and the PC. There aren't any updates yet for the Xbox Series X and S players, sadly.
And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily, so make sure you don't miss them by subscribing. We appreciate your support, and we thank you for checking us out.